Fitz's recruiting update here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Just a reminder, please subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, like the video, and of course, if you want to get more detailed information, the in-depth information, the stuff behind the scenes, all of it fast, immediate, sometimes before anybody else knows it, subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for just $1 for the first week, and then you can decide if you want to join us for a full year. So Friday, Terry Wiggins commits to the Nittany Lions. I know you wrote about him this weekend. What do you think of Terry Wiggins, the latest Penn State commit?
I like Terry Wiggins a lot, and I have for a while now. This is a guy that's got some length there, playing outside linebacker. Penn State is moving toward, they played two box linebackers. They're moving toward more of the outside linebackers, which is kind of the approach under Pry. Manny brought back some of the mics, and then Tom Allen brought back more of the mics, and now all of a sudden you're looking at a team that is a little imbalanced, if we'll say linebacker.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there, because this is a class of 2026 and he will not be on campus until next year. So Terry Wiggins, good player. He's got a lot of range. This is a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. Penn State offered him in October. His first offer last year, like bar none, was in August, just as he was in camp as a junior prospect. So in the grand scheme of things, at players at this level, it's kind of late. And I kind of dig it, because that is what we've talked about with some of these guys that are ascending late. And that means that they can continue to ascend until they get to college. Some of these guys come on early and level off. And I think Wiggins does a lot of nice things. He comes off the edge quite a bit. But he does move sideline to sideline. I think he moves really well. I'd love to see him at camp and get some more numbers on him to see what he can do. But he's got that kind of condor wingspan that you look at, and
I love that.
He does some things very, very well as a linebacker. I think he's going to be a will at Penn State. Probably would have been a will in the old defense as well. So you've got some things to work with. Terry Wiggins, he's a 4-star at On3. He's a 4-star on the industry rankings, and as Charles Powers said on our site this weekend, an ascending prospect, which I think is exciting. Went about this very quietly. Visited Penn State 3 or 4 times, and you always kind of felt that it was going to go this way. Went to Syracuse. His offer list probably not as expansive as I thought it would be. He did take an official visit to Kentucky this spring, but as a prospect I like a lot. I've liked him for a long time. He's probably one of those guys we didn't talk about enough during the process, and then all of a sudden that wave comes and he's ready to commit. So big pickup for Penn State to get the linebackers rolling.
Yeah, and the linebackers kept rolling, and you mentioned he's a will linebacker, mobile athlete, runs in space, played DN, but in high school, a lot of times that's just because you're the best athlete. And like we've seen at Penn State, if you need to get after the quarterback, that's the most valuable thing you could do in football on the defensive side of the ball, in a general sense, when we're talking about football philosophy. But it doesn't mean that they're going all the way that way, because Matthieu Lamah, formerly Matthew Canoe, very different football player. So what do you think of Matthew Canoe, who committed yesterday? Matthieu Lamah committed yesterday to the program as the second linebacker in the class.
Yeah, if you checked out for like a week, or maybe you were in the dark and didn't get your power back, and you saw all of a sudden Penn State picks up Matthieu Lamah, you're wondering what's going on. That's not a guy that's been mentioned. But yeah, Matthieu Canoe from Virginia, big kid, 6'3 plus, 220. This is a guy that I've kind of likened to Jesse Luketa. I think he's a forward mover. I think he's a guy that's a Mike / maybe an end at the next level. Probably going to stick at Mike. He's an athletic kid. He does some really good things on film moving forward. And I say that because just there's not a lot of video of him dropping into coverage. And that's an important part of the Jim Knowles defense. It's an important part of any defense, if we're honest here. But you got contrasting styles, complementary pieces in that linebacker class right now. Lamah came up to campus in the fall, did not pick up an offer, but came right back and picked up an offer. And this kid can bring the wood. Penn State likes what they've got in like I said, those complementary pieces right there. More of a traditional kind of banger playing between the tackles. Penn State doesn't have a Mike that lines up, head up on the center anymore. But this is a guy that kind of fits that role of what you're looking at in a traditional Mike. So
literally, he lines up over the center as a middle linebacker in his defense.
Quite a bit. Every bit of the Mike, he's only missing a neck roll. Like, let's be honest. He's a forward mover, a guy that can get downhill. Like I said, sideline to sideline as he runs the clip that kind of goes sideline to sideline right here. I think he's got some work to do there. Want to see him kind of continue to improve that short area quickness and be there. But he meets people in the hole and they go backwards, which I think is a good thing for linebackers. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I did some full game study on him. I'm going to have the advanced scouting the film room coming up later this week, if not today, at bluewhiteillustrated.com, just to kind of put some finer points of what I saw there. Really good at reading. I love his patience in the run game. But you're right. Even in situations where he drops into coverage, and he doesn't always attack downhill first, but it is his instinct. As soon as the quarterback thinks about breaking the pocket, twitches in the pocket, he's attacking downhill. So, some coverage, but the role he plays, he very much is just kind of standing in the middle of the defense in zone, waiting for somebody to cross through his zone. So there's a bit of an unknown there, but I think given his personality, his size, his on film personality, I should say, and his size, all those things totally fit together into what you're talking about as one of those guys. I think it is valuable to have, especially if you're going to play in this defense where it's a lighter box. You're not going to have as many players. Maybe you won't be dropping that extra safety into the box. You probably want to have one guy that's really good at run defense, and so adding another one of those guys does make sense in kind of the long term of this defense. Speaking of the most valuable things you can have, elite coverage, still at the top of everyone's leaderboard. It's top of the NIL depth chart. Brandon Arrington took his official visit to State College this past weekend. I don't know if he's a 5-star off the top of my head. I apologize, but I know he's one of the top corners in the country. So what do you know about how that went? And, give us the primer on official visit season, which officially started this week.
Yeah, usually when these guys come in, I'm not saying they take their phones from them, but they don't really showcase what's going on in the visit. Brandon Arrington had no problem showcasing that on a social level this weekend. We appreciate him doing that, by the way. But he was in town for this weekend. It was the first official visit. He was the only official visitor this weekend, and he's a talented player, man. He's way up there in On3's rankings, number 28 nationally, number 13 in the On3 industry rankings, number 1 cornerback nationally. This is one where Terry Smith's reputation is one that got him in here. I know that he's very intrigued by what's available to him at Penn State from a developmental standpoint, from a eventually playing time standpoint and things like that. I think that there's a lot going for Penn State in that regard. They're also 2,500, 3,000 miles from home. I think that's going to be an issue. And he's got some pretty good visits here coming on tap. I don't think it was a courtesy visit. I think he was really interested. I think he really is interested in what Penn State brings to mind. But Oregon and USC, both out west, have something to say about that. Texas A&M has a lot to say about everything, and then Alabama, of course. So like you're talking about a guy that's one of the national elite prospects. Penn State views him as such. When going through the cornerback board, still have Dorian Barney and Kari Adams as the top guys, but that's just because we kind of put Arrington in a separate spot, because
he's one of those +1 no matter what, probably across the board,
no matter what. And I just think that the chances of Penn State landing him are not great. So it would kind of a moonshot type deal.
Right.
But like, impressed with what he saw, impressed with Terry Smith, Jim Knowles, all those guys. And I think that Penn State, because of their defensive reputation, because of what they've done in the defensive backfield over the last several years, I think is certainly like put themselves in the mix. And it's not a moral victory to be in the top 5 for a California kid that's a 5-star prospect. Maybe it is. It doesn't win you anything. He's not going to play here because of a moral victory. But at the same time, like, it shows you that there's a little bit more national appeal as Penn State continues to sort of forge itself in the national landscape.
Yeah, especially at these premier positions like corner. I think the guy I was trying to talk about a couple weeks ago, Brian Harris, who eventually went to Georgia, being in the conversation is the first step here. And for people listening on the podcast that can't see what we have here on the YouTube channel, 6'2.5", 180. He is the 13th overall player in the class of 2026. He is a 5-star. In the On3 rankings, he is a 4-star, a high 4-star, 28th overall. That means he'll eventually be a 5-star if he stays there, because we only give out 32 of those 5 stars to represent 32 first-round draft picks in the NFL. But he is a 5-star by ESPN and Rivals. So a guy that is well considered across the board.
And there's differences here. You mentioned Brian Harris coming up from Florida. I mean, Penn State was in on him fairly early, in the sense that, like, he didn't have a big offer list until recently. Alabama offered, a couple other schools offered. That Penn State kind of forged that through. Brandon Arrington's been on the radar forever, and it's a bit different than a guy like Darius Dixon. Darius Dixon was viewed as a guy that maybe, I don't want to say had peaked, but like, there was so many questions about his speed that when it broke down to time, or when it was time to take official visits, it was Penn State, it was Washington. It wasn't the USC and Oregon, which, USC for everything that for who boy, how do I say this without
The perception is very different than the reality there. It seems.
for the results that they've had, like, still to me is way up there, especially for a West Coast kid, because that's the appeal, and that has been there. And they've got, I think, the number 2 or 3 class nationally right now in the 2026 class. So I thought that Penn State did a really good job here, but Finney, somebody mentioned Finney in the chat. Brandon Arrington's kind of just on a different level there, and you know what he's got because he's a track star. He's in the low 10s in the 100, and again, he's not a 5'7" sprinter. He's 6'2.5", 180. He can really run. He's got all those like dots that you like. When you go through and check the boxes, he's got a lot of those going for him. So
yeah.
Going to be a tough one for Penn State to win this one, especially getting him on campus this early as the first official visit. But I mean, he was impressed. I mean, there's not much you can go beyond that.